Big news of the morning, Donald Trump and his administration apparently violated the law when they deployed the National Guard to LA in response to mild protests against ICE activities here in LA. That is according to a federal judge. And Gavin Newsom immediately declared victory, saying Donald Trump loses again. The courts agree. His militarization of our streets and use of the military against US citizens is illegal, and that is true, at least for right now. We're in that exciting period in the news cycle where a judge has made a ruling. The ruling is fairly obvious because the Constitution is oftentimes very clear. And so the law has been reasserted and will eventually be overturned by the Supreme Court. But for right now, the law reigns supreme. And so before the SCOTUS blows the entire thing up, we're just gonna go into what the judge actually ruled. So it is in fact, according to this judge, a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878, which prohibits the use of the US military to execute domestic law, which this very clearly was. And the excuse provided by the regime did not cut the mustard for this judge, Charles Breyer, who said, there were indeed protests in LA and some individuals engaged in violence, yet there was no rebellion, nor was civilian law enforcement unable to respond to the protests and enforce the law. Not only were they not unable to wrangle the small number of protesters, this wasn't riots in the streets, buildings weren't being sacked. Basically, this wasn't January 6th, to be clear, but neither LA nor California wanted this. They were specifically saying, don't come in. And so, I have to constantly be cognizant of the fact that wild things are being normalized every day. I just want to remind everyone that while the National Guard has very rarely in American history been deployed to American streets to deal with protests or whatever, this was the first time it was done against the will of the city and the state where it was happening. They didn't want this, so they specifically said not to have it happen. But what they apparently lost, what Mayor Bass and Gavin Newsom didn't understand was this was a necessary step along the way to normalize constant military occupation. So you do this in LA, where it's LA. Conservatives aren't gonna care about that. You can do whatever you want. And then you start doing it in DC maybe. Again, the area doesn't want it, but you invent, okay, well, there's not protests, so crime is up even though it's not. So get used to that. And then get used to, we're gonna send them to 19 states and cities across America. And within 6 months, it'll just be everywhere. And you'll think I'm weird if I point out that we ever lived in a country where there weren't constant soldiers toting assault rifles and tanks in the streets. And very importantly, in 1 year, by the midterms, it'll be the most normal thing in the world. And so when Atlanta and Detroit and Philly and Pittsburgh and wherever are just militarily occupied, and your ability to move freely in the city might be curtailed around the time that you want to vote, that will be considered very normal. And so I'm gonna get to more of what the judge had to say, but Elliot, feel free to jump in. What do you make of this judicial ruling?
We both live in Los Angeles, and you're completely right. I remember being like, "Hey, please leave," and it turns out they didn't listen to me at all. What came to mind was Kamala Harris saying, do not come," over and over again, even though that meme's been used for very different reasons recently. However, this is a situation where everyone on the left, when Donald Trump was reelected, was going, he's going to deploy the military, and he's going to do all of these things with his anti-immigration agenda. And I always try to not be an alarmist and try to be like, oh yeah, it won't be that bad. That's bad for his branding. He wouldn't do that. And I was totally wrong. It seems that any single concern that has been listed is, as you're saying, just coming to fruition, and it is getting normalized. And so it is kind of scary to wonder where we're going to be at in a year.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm sure as the fans and my detractors both can attest, I say a lot of things in a given year. So I'm sure there's things that I said about Trump that will prove to be hyperbolic. But I don't know, when it comes to military in the streets, I feel like we maybe didn't go hard enough on that or fast enough. We certainly didn't think it was gonna happen this quickly. His willingness to take unilateral control of our election systems and just decide nobody gets to do mail-in voting, or over the weekend, as he did, he says, I'm gonna require a voter ID across the entire country. He can't, but he's gonna try to anyway. So on militarization in the streets, taking over the election systems, I don't think that I didn't think he'd go this hard on Gaza. We're gonna get to his plan or whatever, the plan that was presented to him. I feel like in those areas we were very far from being alarmists. That said, let me give you just a little bit more of what the judge had to say. I want to make sure that it's officially registered before it's overturned by the Supreme Court. The judge determined that the administration illegally and systematically used armed soldiers whose identity was often obscured by protective armor. I like that the judge made a note of that as in so many areas, the police, real or secret, that are flooding our streets, you're not allowed to know who they are. They're basically just saying it's a military presence. That's what it was. And in short, it was a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. And so what happens now? Well, first of all, nothing happens for the next week. The judge stayed his own ruling until September 7th, I believe. But for now, the Trump administration will be blocked from deploying, ordering, instructing, training, or using the National Guard currently deployed in California and any military troops heretofore deployed in California to execute the laws. Basically, a whole bunch of police stuff that they would do. Interestingly, it does not require them to take away the 300 troops still deployed. I don't know why. Like you broke the law by sending them, but now they're there. It would be a whole big thing to get them out of there. And again, what really matters is this will be instantly appealed. I'm sure it's already being appealed. So what happens when we go to the Supreme Court? Are they gonna overturn this? In which case, bye-bye any local control of the military over the next few years? Or do they perhaps broaden this and say, yeah, we've noticed a startling and worrying pattern of trampling over the Constitution with invented emergencies, whether having to do with ICE or having to do with crime. He's just saying whatever he thinks he needs to say. And so that's really what's gonna matter. I have no idea when that's gonna happen, Elliot, but any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's like perception is reality. And this is one of those situations where we get to just sort of bask in actual reality for a second and be like, hey, look at that. They are breaking the law. And it's just a brief moment in time before it just all goes away. So I think we should just sit and relish in this and enjoy it and be like, hey, there is a spark of justice right before it gets extinguished.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's that weird thing where it's like, maybe it would almost be better if the judge hadn't asserted the law, because then we could have hope. But if he asserts it and then the administration's like, no, I don't care, that's almost worse. Like the judge just in the last few days was like, yeah, those tariffs are on hold. You're out of your mind. You can't do these tariffs. Then Trump's like, no, we're just doing them.
We're gonna do them. Yeah.
So that's a little bit worrying. If you enjoyed that, then make sure that you never miss another video by subscribing. And if you want a little more, consider hitting the join button and becoming a member. So you're probably wondering, why would I do that? Well, when you do that, you get access to bonus content that I make every single week, and it's a lot of fun. You get custom emojis and more. If you join at tier 3, by the way, you even get access to a monthly member hangout with myself. And you'll get all that going forward, but you'll also unlock years of the back catalog that is literally 100 or more bonus clips and top 10 lists and debates and more. So what are you waiting for?